Imagine this. A man is walking through a quiet village at night. Nothing is happening. No danger, no threat, just silence. But suddenly, he starts running, faster, breathing harder, looking behind him again and again, as if something is chasing him. People see him and ask, "What's wrong? Who's after you?" And he says, "I don't know, but I feel it." So he keeps running, his heart racing, his body tense, his mind screaming, "You're not safe. Keep going. Don't stop." Hours pass. He is exhausted, collapsed on the ground, still afraid, still convinced something is coming. But when someone finally stops him and forces him to look behind, there is nothing there. No one, no danger, no threat, just an empty road. Now, here is the part that matters. The fear was real. The running was real. The exhaustion was real. But the threat was never real. It was created by his own mind, and he never stopped long enough to question it. Now, look at yourself. How many times have you done the same? Not physically, but mentally, running from thoughts, fearing things that haven't happened, replaying things that are already gone, reacting to something that only exists in your mind. And because you never stop, you never turn around. You never see the truth. Nothing is chasing you. Only your thoughts are. And the moment you stop and actually look, the illusion begins to break. But until then, you keep running. Not because you have to, but because you believe you do. You believe every thought, and it's silently destroying you. A thought appears, and you don't notice the exact moment you agree with it. It is so fast, so subtle, that it feels like it was always true. There is no pause, no questioning, no distance, just instant acceptance. I'm not good enough. Something is wrong with me. This will never work. And the moment these thoughts appear, something inside you quietly says, yes, not out loud. No one else hears it. But internally, you accept it. You don't examine it. You don't test it. You don't step back and ask, is this even real? You just believe it. And that is the moment the trap closes. Because from that point forward, you are no longer seeing life as it is. You are seeing life through the lens of that thought. And once that happens, everything begins to shift. Your mood changes first. A small heaviness enters your chest. Then your energy drops. Simple things start to feel difficult. Then your behavior follows. You hesitate. You avoid. You hold yourself back. Not because reality changed, but because a single thought was accepted without awareness. This is how powerful the mind is. It does not need evidence. It does not need logic. It only needs your agreement. And once you give it, it builds a story around it. If the thought is, I'm not good enough, the mind begins collecting proof. You remember past failures. You replay embarrassing moments. You focus on what you lack. And slowly, that thought starts to feel more real. Not because it is true, but because your mind keeps feeding it. And at the same time, it ignores everything that contradicts it. Your strengths, your progress, your growth. All of it becomes invisible because the mind is now biased. It is no longer observing reality. It is protecting a belief. And over time, this becomes your identity. You stop saying, I had a negative thought. Instead, you start saying, this is who I am. And that is where the real suffering begins. Because now, you are not just experiencing thoughts, you are living inside them. Buddhism invites you to look at this differently. not intellectually, but directly. It asks you to observe your own mind, to watch how thoughts appear without calling them true, without calling them false, just watching. And when you do this, something surprising becomes clear. Thoughts are not stable. They do not stay. They are constantly changing. One moment you feel confident, the next moment doubt appears, then it disappears. Then something else replaces it. If thoughts were truly you, they would not change like this, but they do, which means they are not you. They are events, like clouds passing through the sky. They come, they stay for a moment, then they go. But imagine this: if you grabbed every cloud and held onto it, refusing to let it pass, the sky would become crowded, heavy, overwhelming. That is exactly what you are doing with your thoughts. You are holding on to them, clinging to them, repeating them, and because of that, your mind feels full. No space, no clarity, just constant noise. But the moment you stop holding, everything begins to change. The thoughts still appear. They don't stop, but you don't attach to them. You don't follow them. You don't build stories around them. You just notice them and let them pass. This is not suppression. You are not forcing them away. You are simply not feeding them. And without your attention, they lose their strength. But this requires awareness, because most of the time, you are not aware that you are thinking. You are lost inside the thought, completely identified with it. So the first step is very simple. Not easy, but simple. Notice. Notice when a thought appears. Notice the moment you start believing it. Notice how your body reacts, how your mood shifts, how your behavior begins to change. Just observe, without judgment, without trying to fix it, because the moment you see it clearly, you are no longer trapped inside it. You are now watching it. And that small shift changes everything. You move from being controlled to being aware. And in that awareness, a question naturally arises. If thoughts are just appearing, and I am not choosing them, then why am I believing all of them? That question is powerful, because it breaks the automatic pattern. It creates space, and in that space, you begin to see the truth. Not every thought deserves your belief. Not every thought deserves your attention. Some thoughts are just noise, conditioning, old patterns repeating themselves. And when you stop treating them as truth, they lose their authority over you. This is where freedom begins. Not by controlling the mind, not by stopping thoughts, but by no longer being enslaved by them. And once you experience this, even for a moment, you realize something deeply important. The problem was never your thoughts. The problem was your unconscious belief in them. And now, that belief is starting to break. You think your mind is you, and that's the illusion. There is a voice in your head, and it has been with you for as long as you can remember. It speaks in your language. It uses your memories. It comments on everything you do, and because it feels familiar, you trust it. Not because you chose to, but because you never questioned it. It sounds like you, so you assume it is you. But look closely. This voice is not stable. It changes constantly. One moment it tells you, you can do this. Another moment it says, you will fail. One day it lifts you up. The next day it pulls you down. If this voice were truly you, why would it contradict itself? Why would it create confusion inside you? Why would it generate fear, doubt, and suffering? There is something deeper happening. something you have overlooked your entire life. You are not the voice. You are the one listening to it. But this distinction is so subtle that you miss it. And because you miss it, you become whatever the voice says. When the mind produces fear, you say, "I am afraid." When the mind produces doubt, you say, "I am not capable." When the mind criticizes you, you accept it as identity. You don't say, "A thought of fear is present." You say, "This is me." And that is where the illusion becomes complete, because now you are no longer observing your experience. You are becoming it. Buddhism points directly at this illusion, not to confuse you, but to free you. It teaches that what you call yourself is not a fixed entity. It is a process, a constant flow. Thoughts arise, emotions appear, sensations move through the body. Nothing stays the same. Everything is changing. But something within you is aware of all of it. Right now, as you read this, thoughts are appearing. Reactions are happening. Maybe agreement, maybe resistance, but there is also awareness of all of it. That awareness is silent. It does not argue. It does not judge. It simply observes. And it has been there your entire life. When you were a child, it was there. When your thoughts were different, it was still there. When your beliefs changed, it remained unchanged. This is important because it shows you something clearly. Thoughts are not you. They change. Emotions are not you. They come and go. Even your personality has shifted over time, but awareness has remained constant. So, which one is truly you? The thing that constantly changes, or the thing that quietly observes the change? This is where the illusion begins to break, because once you see this, you cannot unsee it. You start noticing the voice in your head as something separate, not completely separate, but not identical to you. You hear it, but you don't have to obey it. You notice it, but you don't have to become it. And this creates space, small at first, but powerful, because in that space, you have a choice. Before, there was no gap. A thought appeared, and you immediately became it. Now, a thought appears, and you can watch it. You can see it forming. You can feel its pull, but you are not inside it anymore. You are observing it. And in that observation, something begins to loosen. The grip of the mind weakens because it no longer has complete control. It can still speak. It can still produce thoughts, but it cannot force you to identify with them. And this changes everything, because suffering is not created by thoughts alone. It is created by identification with thoughts. It is created when you say, "This is me." But when you stop doing that, the same thoughts lose their power. Fear may still arise, but it passes. Doubt may still appear, but it doesn't define you. Negative thoughts may still come, but they don't trap you, because you are no longer inside them. You are watching them. Buddhism does not ask you to destroy the mind. It does not ask you to silence it. It asks you to understand it, to see it clearly, to observe its patterns, its contradictions, its constant movement. And through that observation, you naturally stop identifying with it. This is not something you force. It happens gradually. The more you observe, the more distance appears. The more distance appears, the less control the mind has. And slowly, you begin to experience something new, a quiet presence, a sense of being that is not dependent on thoughts, not dependent on emotions, not dependent on circumstances. It is just there, still, unmoving, aware. And from that place, you begin to live differently. You still think, you still feel, you still experience life. But you are no longer lost in it. You are no longer defined by it. You are no longer trapped inside your own mind. And that is the beginning of true freedom. Not the absence of thoughts, but the end of unconscious identification with them. The more you fight your feelings, the stronger they become. There is a feeling inside you, and you don't want it there. You didn't invite it. You didn't choose it, but it appeared. Maybe it is anxiety, a tightness in your chest, a restless energy that won't settle. Maybe it is sadness, heavy, quiet, draining your motivation. Or maybe it is something you cannot even name, just a discomfort that follows you. And your first instinct is always the same. Get rid of it, fix it, escape it. You tell yourself, I shouldn't feel this way. This needs to go. So you distract yourself. You reach for your phone. You fill your time. You avoid silence, because silence brings you closer to it. And you don't want that. You want distance. You want relief. But look closely at what actually happens. The more you try to escape the feeling, the more it stays. The more you resist it, the stronger it becomes. This is the part that confuses you. Because you believe you are solving the problem, but you are actually feeding it. Every time you say, this should not be here, you create tension. Every time you push it away, you give it importance. You turn it into something that must be fought. And now, it is no longer just a feeling. It is a problem, and problems demand attention. So your mind keeps returning to it, checking it, monitoring it, trying to fix it. And this constant attention keeps it alive. This is the trap. You are not suffering only from the feeling itself. You are suffering from your resistance to it. Buddhism describes this very clearly. Pain is natural. Suffering is resistance. The feeling itself is only one layer, but your rejection of it creates a second layer, a heavier layer, because now you are not just feeling anxiety. You are fighting anxiety. You are not just experiencing sadness. You are resisting sadness. And that resistance creates friction inside you. It tightens your body. It agitates your mind. It drains your energy. And the feeling, instead of fading, becomes stronger because you are feeding it with attention and fear. But what happens if you do something different? Not what your instinct tells you. Not running. Not distracting. Not fixing. Just stopping and allowing the feeling to be there. At first, it feels uncomfortable, even wrong, because you are so used to fighting it. But if you stay, if you don't move away, you begin to notice something. The feeling is not as solid as you thought. It is not one heavy block. It is made of sensations, tightness, pressure, movement, warmth, cold. And these sensations are changing, moment by moment, not staying the same, not permanent. You start to see the feeling is not fixed. It is a process. And when you stop resisting, that process begins to move, slowly, gently, but noticeably. The intensity begins to shift, not because you forced it to change, but because you stopped holding it in place. Resistance is what freezes it. Acceptance is what allows it to flow. This does not mean the feeling disappears instantly. It doesn't. Sometimes it stays for a while, but something important has changed. You are no longer adding to it. You are no longer turning it into a problem. You are simply experiencing it. And in that experience, there is less suffering because you are not fighting reality anymore. You are allowing it. Buddhism calls this awareness without attachment. You feel, but you don't cling. You experience, but you don't resist. You observe without judgment. And this creates a completely different relationship with your emotions. Fear can arise, but it doesn't control you. Sadness can appear, but it doesn't define you. Discomfort can exist, but it doesn't trap you, because you are no longer reacting automatically. You are present, watching, allowing. And from that place, something unexpected happens. The feeling begins to lose its power, not because it disappeared, but because you are no longer afraid of it. You are no longer trying to escape it. And without fear, without resistance, the feeling has nothing to hold on to. It comes, it stays for a moment, and then it passes, just like everything else. But this requires trust. Trust that you can face what you feel. Trust that you don't need to run. Trust that the feeling will not destroy you. Because the truth is, the feeling was never the danger. Your resistance was. And the moment you stop fighting yourself, the inner conflict begins to dissolve. You are no longer divided, no longer pulling in opposite directions. You are simply here, with what is. And in that acceptance, you discover something deeper than relief. You discover peace. Not because everything feels good, but because you are no longer at war with your own experience. Your mind is trapped in time, and you call it life. Right now, your body is here, but your mind is not. It has already moved. It has gone somewhere else. Maybe to something that happened earlier today. A conversation, a mistake, a moment you keep replaying. You go over it again and again, thinking about what you should have said, what you could have done differently. And every time you replay it, it feels real. The emotion comes back. The tension returns, as if it is happening again. But it is not. It is already gone. And yet, you are reliving it. Then, suddenly, your mind jumps forward to something that hasn't even happened, a situation you are worried about, a future you are trying to control. You imagine scenarios, outcomes, problems, and your body reacts. Your heart tightens. Your thoughts accelerate. You feel stress about something that does not even exist yet. This is how your mind lives, constantly moving back and forth. Past, future, rarely here. And because of this, you are almost never experiencing life directly. You are experiencing your thoughts about life. This is the trap, and it is so common that you don't even notice it. You call it thinking. You call it planning. You call it being aware. But in reality, you are lost in time, because the past is nothing more than memory, images, fragments, stored in the mind. It cannot be touched. It cannot be changed. It only exists as thought, and the future is nothing more than imagination, projections, possibilities. It has not arrived. It is not real. Yet your mind treats both as if they are happening now, and your body responds accordingly. You feel regret about something that no longer exists. You feel anxiety about something that does not exist yet. And all the while, the present moment, the only place where life is actually happening, is being ignored. Buddhism points to this very clearly. Suffering is created by the mind's movement through time, because when you are fully here, there is no problem. Look closely. Right now, in this exact moment, what is actually wrong? Not what your mind is saying, not what it is remembering, not what it is predicting, but right now, if you remove the past and the future, what remains? Breathing, sensation, awareness. This moment, as it is, and in this moment, there is a certain simplicity, nothing extra, nothing added, just what is. But the mind finds this uncomfortable because it is used to stimulation, used to stories, used to constant movement. So it creates something. It brings back the past. It projects the future. It fills the space with thought, and you follow it. Without realizing, you have left the present. This is how the trap continues. You are not suffering because of life itself. You are suffering because of where your mind is, not here, somewhere else. And as long as that continues, the suffering continues. But something changes. When you become aware of this movement, when you notice, my mind has left the present, that moment of noticing is powerful because it brings you back, not forcefully, not aggressively, just gently. You return to the breath. You feel your body. You become aware of your surroundings. And suddenly, the noise reduces. The tension softens because you are no longer feeding the past or the future. You are here. This does not mean the mind stops. It will still try to pull you back into memories, forward into worries, again and again. But now, you see it. You recognize it. And because you recognize it, you don't have to follow it every time. You have a choice to stay or to be carried away. And the more you choose to stay, even for a few seconds, the more familiar the present becomes. It no longer feels empty. It no longer feels boring. It feels real, alive, direct, because this is where life actually unfolds. Not in your thoughts, not in your imagination, but here, now. Buddhism calls this mindfulness, not as a technique, but as a way of being, a return, again and again, to the present moment, because every time you return, you step out of the illusion of time, you step out of unnecessary suffering, and you begin to see clearly. The past cannot harm you. The future cannot harm you. Only your thoughts about them can. And when you stop living inside those thoughts, you discover something simple but deeply freeing. Life was never the problem. You were just never fully here to experience it. Your need for control is what's breaking you. There is a quiet expectation inside you. Things should go your way. Not perfectly, not always, but enough that you feel secure. You want plans to work. You want people to behave the way you expect. You want outcomes to match what you imagined. And when they don't, you feel it immediately. A tightness, a resistance, a sense that something is wrong. But look closely. What is actually wrong? Is it the situation itself? Or is it the fact that it did not match your expectation? Because life is still moving. Moments are still unfolding. Nothing has stopped. Nothing has broken. But inside you, there is conflict. And that conflict comes from one thing: your need for control. You want certainty. You want predictability. You want to know what will happen, so you can feel safe. But life does not work that way. It never has. Everything is changing. Constantly. People change. Circumstances shift. Outcomes unfold in ways you cannot predict. And yet, you keep trying to hold it all together. You try to manage every detail. You overthink decisions. You replay conversations. You prepare for every possible outcome because you believe if you think enough, if you plan enough, if you control enough, you can prevent discomfort, you can avoid pain, you can secure a certain kind of life. But notice what this does to you. It exhausts you because you are trying to control something that cannot be controlled. It is like trying to hold water in your hands. The tighter you grip, the faster it slips through your fingers, and the more frustrated you become because it feels like you are failing. But you are not failing. You are just fighting reality. Buddhism teaches something very direct. Everything is impermanent. Nothing stays the same. And the more you resist this truth, the more suffering you create, because you are demanding stability. From something that is naturally unstable, you are asking life to stop changing, and that is impossible. So the tension continues, again and again. But what happens if you stop demanding control, not giving up, not becoming passive, but releasing the need for everything to go your way? Something begins to shift. The tightness inside you softens because you are no longer forcing reality to match your expectations. You are allowing it to be what it is. This does not mean you stop acting. You still make decisions. You still take steps. You still move forward. But you are no longer attaching your peace to the outcome. You act, but you don't cling. You plan, but you don't depend. You move, but you don't force. And this creates a completely different experience of life. Because now, when things don't go your way, you don't collapse. You don't resist as strongly. You adapt. You adjust. You continue. There is less friction, less inner conflict, because you are no longer fighting what is already happening. Buddhism calls this non-attachment, not detachment from life, but detachment from the need to control it. You are fully engaged, but not dependent. You care, but you don't cling. You act, but you are not bound to the result. And in that state, there is a kind of freedom, because your peace is no longer fragile. It is no longer dependent on circumstances. It is no longer controlled by outcomes. It comes from within, from your relationship with what is. And something else becomes clear. Much of your stress was never about the situation. It was about your resistance to it. It was about the gap between what is happening and what you wanted to happen. And when that gap disappears, the suffering disappears with it. Not because everything becomes perfect, but because you are no longer demanding perfection. You are working with life instead of against it. And in that shift, you realize something important. Control was never giving you peace. It was taking it away. And the moment you loosen your grip, even slightly, you feel it. A sense of ease, a sense of flow, a sense that you don't have to fight everything anymore. Life is still uncertain, still changing, still unpredictable, but you are no longer at war with it. You are part of it, moving with it, responding to it. And in that alignment, there is a quiet strength, not forced, not rigid, but flexible, adaptable, present. And that is where true stability is found, not in controlling life, but in no longer needing to. Look deeper. This need for control did not appear randomly. It was built over time, through experience, through fear, through moments where things did not go your way, and it hurt. So your mind learned something. If I can control things, I can avoid that pain again. And from that moment, control started to feel like safety. You began trying to predict outcomes, to read people, to prepare for every possibility, not because you wanted power, but because you wanted protection. You wanted certainty. But the problem is this: control does not remove uncertainty. It only gives the illusion that it does. And the more you rely on that illusion, the more fragile you become, because life keeps proving you wrong. Things still go differently. People still surprise you. Situations still unfold in ways you didn't expect. And every time that happens, you feel shaken, not just by what happened, but by the loss of control. This is where anxiety begins to grow, because now you feel like you must control even more, think more, plan more, prepare more. So you tighten your grip, you overanalyze every decision, you replay every interaction, you try to anticipate every possible outcome. But instead of feeling safe, you feel overwhelmed, because the more you try to control, the more you realize you can't, and that realization creates fear. A quiet fear that says, if I let go, everything will fall apart. So you don't let go. You hold tighter, even when it hurts, even when it drains you, even when it takes your peace. This is the cycle. Control creates tension. Tension creates fear. Fear increases the need for control, and the cycle repeats again and again. But what you don't see is that the suffering is not coming from uncertainty. It is coming from your resistance to it. Because uncertainty is natural. It has always been part of life. You just became aware of it and tried to remove it. But it cannot be removed, only understood, only accepted. Buddhism does not tell you to trust outcomes. It tells you to trust your ability to face whatever comes. That is a completely different kind of stability. Not based on controlling the future, but based on being present with it. Because when you are present, you respond. When you are lost in control, you react. And there is a difference. Reaction comes from fear. Response comes from awareness. Reaction is rushed. Response is clear. Reaction tries to force. Response adapt. And the moment you shift from reaction to response, you no longer need to control everything, because you trust yourself to handle what arises. This is where real strength begins, not in controlling life, but in meeting it as it is, without resistance, without panic, without the need to make everything perfect. You start to see that most of your effort was not helping you. It was exhausting you. You were carrying the weight of things that were never yours to carry. Other people's actions, future outcomes, uncertain possibilities, all of it, held tightly in your mind. And that weight was draining your peace. But what happens when you loosen that grip? Not completely, not all at once, but just a little. You stop trying to control every outcome. You allow some uncertainty. You let things unfold without forcing them. At first, it feels uncomfortable because you are stepping out of a familiar pattern. But then, something unexpected happens. You feel lighter, not because everything is solved, but because you are no longer carrying everything. You begin to experience life directly. Instead of constantly managing it, you listen more, you observe more, you react less. Because you are not trying to control every moment, you are simply present in it. And in that presence, clarity appears. You see what needs to be done, without overthinking, without forcing. You act when action is needed, and you let go when it is not. This is balance, not passive, not controlling, but aligned. And slowly. The fear of letting go begins to fade because you realize something important. Letting go does not mean losing control. It means releasing the illusion of control and discovering something deeper. Trust, not in outcomes, not in people, but in your ability to remain steady, no matter what happens. And that trust is far more powerful than control, because control depends on conditions. Trust does not. Control breaks when things go wrong. Trust remains. Control creates tension. Trust creates ease. And when you begin to live from that place, life does not become predictable. It becomes manageable, not because you control it, but because you are no longer afraid of it. And that is the shift. From forcing life to flowing with it, from fear to understanding, from control to freedom. You keep comparing, and it's killing your peace. It begins quietly. You look at someone else's life, their success, their progress, their position, and something inside you shifts. Not loudly, not dramatically, but enough to disturb your peace. A thought appears. They are ahead of me. And without noticing, you agree with it. Then another thought follows. I should be further by now. And again, you accept it. This is how comparison starts. Not as a decision, but as a reaction. Automatic, unquestioned. And once it begins, it spreads. You start measuring everything. Your work, your growth, your life, against someone else. And slowly, what you have stops feeling enough. Because now, everything is being evaluated. Everything is being judged. And no matter how much you achieve, there is always someone doing more. So the mind keeps pointing it out. You are behind. You are not there yet. You need to catch up. And with each thought, your peace decreases. Your satisfaction fades. Because you are no longer experiencing your life directly. You are comparing it. Constantly. Relentlessly. And this creates a silent pressure. A pressure to be more. Do more. Become more. Not because you genuinely want to grow, but because you feel like you are not enough as you are. This is the trap. Because comparison does not lead to peace. It leads to dissatisfaction. Always. Even if you reach a certain level, the mind will find someone above you, and the cycle continues. So there is no end point, no moment where you finally feel complete. Because comparison is not based on reality. It is based on perception, and perception is incomplete. You are comparing your internal experience to someone else's external image. You see what they show, their highlights, their visible success, their progress. But you do not see their struggles, their doubts, their fears, their private moments of confusion. You don't see the full picture. And yet, you build a judgment based on what you see. And then, you turn that judgment against yourself. This is deeply unfair, but it happens so quickly, you don't even realize it. Buddhism points to something very important here. Each life unfolds differently. There is no single path, no shared timeline, no universal standard of ahead or behind. These are ideas created by the mind, comparisons created by conditioning. And once you see this, something begins to shift. You start questioning the comparison itself. According to who? Based on what? Why should my path look like theirs? And when you ask these questions, the structure of comparison begins to weaken, because you realize you have been measuring your life, using someone else's standards, standards that may not even apply to you. And once you see that, you begin to return to your own experience, to your own path, your own pace, your own reality. And something changes. You start noticing what is actually here, your progress, your growth, your effort, things you previously ignored. Because you were too focused on others, you begin to appreciate where you are, not because it is perfect, but because it is real. And in that appreciation, there is peace, not forced, not created, but natural, because you are no longer dividing yourself, no longer saying, "This is not enough, this should be more." You are simply acknowledging what is. And from that place, growth becomes different. It is no longer driven by pressure. It is no longer fueled by comparison. It comes from clarity, from understanding, from a genuine desire to move forward, not to compete, not to prove something, but to evolve. And this kind of growth is sustainable because it is not built on dissatisfaction. It is built on awareness. Buddhism teaches that suffering arises when you attach yourself to ideas of self. I should be this. I should be there. I should have achieved that. And comparison feeds these ideas. It strengthens them. It makes them feel real. But when you let go of comparison, these ideas begin to dissolve. You stop defining yourself through external measures. You stop chasing an image. You start living directly, fully, in your own experience. And in that space, something important happens. You feel lighter because you are no longer carrying the weight of expectations. You are no longer competing with invisible standards. You are simply moving at your own pace. And that pace is enough. Not because someone said it is, but because you see it clearly. And when you see it clearly, the need to compare disappears, because you realize something simple. You were never behind. You were just looking at someone else's path, instead of walking your own. Look even deeper. Comparison is not just something you do once in a while. It becomes a lens, a way of seeing everything. You walk into a room and your mind immediately scans. Who is more confident? Who looks better? Who seems more successful? And, without any conscious effort, you place yourself somewhere in that invisible ranking. Higher, lower, better, worse. This happens so fast, you don't even notice it, but your body feels it. If you place yourself below, there is tension, insecurity, a quiet shrinking. If you place yourself above, there is a different tension, ego, fear of losing that position, a need to maintain it. So either way, you are not at peace, because comparison does not allow neutrality. It forces judgment constantly, and this judgment creates distance between you and others, between you and yourself, because now you are no longer simply present. You are evaluating, measuring, positioning, and that takes you out of direct experience, out of reality, into a mental construct where everything is divided: better, worse, ahead, behind. This is where suffering deepens, because the mind is never satisfied with its position. If you feel below others, you want to rise. If you feel above others, you fear falling. So there is always movement, always tension, no stillness, no rest. Buddhism reveals something subtle here. Comparison is rooted in the illusion of a fixed self, a solid identity that must be defined, measured, proven. But when you observe closely, that self is not stable. It is constantly changing. Your thoughts change. Your emotions change. Your abilities change. Your circumstances change. So, what exactly are you comparing? A changing process with another changing process at different points in time, under different conditions. It has no solid foundation, and yet you treat it as absolute. You say, "This is who I am. This is where I stand." But that position is unstable. It shifts constantly, so your sense of self becomes unstable too. And that creates anxiety, because now you have something to protect, something to maintain, something to prove. And the more you try to hold on to it, the more pressure you feel. This is why comparison is exhausting, because it never ends. Even when you succeed, the mind moves the target. Now you need more. Now you need to reach the next level. There is still someone ahead. So there is no completion, no satisfaction, just continuous striving. But what happens when you step out of this structure completely, not trying to win, not trying to rank, not trying to position yourself, just observing, without comparison? At first, it feels unfamiliar because you are so used to measuring, but then something begins to settle. You look at others without turning it into a judgment about yourself. You see their success without making it your failure. You see their progress without turning it into your delay. And this changes everything, because now their path is theirs and your path is yours. Separate, not competing, not conflicting, just unfolding differently. And in that separation, there is relief. You no longer carry the weight of proving yourself. You no longer need to constantly evaluate your worth. You simply exist as you are. And from that place, something new becomes possible. Connection, real connection. Because when comparison disappears, you stop seeing others as competition. You stop measuring them. You stop placing yourself above or below. You just see them as they are. And you see yourself as you are, without distortion, without judgment, without pressure. And in that clarity, there is peace. Not because you achieved something, but because you stopped dividing everything. Buddhism points to this as a form of liberation, freedom from the constant need to define yourself, to compare, to measure, to prove. And when that need dissolves, you begin to live differently. You act without trying to be better than someone else. You grow without needing to outperform. You move forward without carrying the burden of comparison. And that movement feels lighter, more natural, more honest. Because it is not driven by lack, it is driven by awareness. And slowly, the voice of comparison fades, not because you forced it to stop, but because you no longer believe it, you no longer follow it, you no longer build your identity around it. And in that silence, you discover something you may have never felt before. Enoughness, not as an idea, but as a direct experience. You are here, you are moving, you are growing at your own pace, on your own path. And that is enough, not compared to anyone else, not measured against anything, just enough. And in that realization, peace returns, not temporarily, but deeply, because you are no longer fighting an invisible race. You have stepped out of it completely. You never question the mind, so it controls everything. There is something you trust more than anything else, your own mind, not because you examined it, not because you tested it, but because it is always there, constantly speaking, constantly guiding, constantly interpreting everything you experience. So you assume it must be right. When a thought appears, you follow it. When it judges something, you agree with it. When it creates a story, you step inside it, without hesitation, without distance, without question. And this is where the deepest trap exists, because you question everything else. You question people, you question decisions, you question situations, but you rarely question the one thing, creating all of it, the mind. You never stop and ask, is this thought even accurate? Why is my mind saying this? Where is this coming from? Instead, you accept it instantly. And once you accept it, it becomes your reality. This is how control happens, not through force, but through unconscious agreement. The mind produces a thought, and you believe it. That belief shapes your perception. Your perception shapes your emotions. Your emotions shape your actions, and your actions shape your life, all from a single unexamined thought. And because this process is automatic, you don't see it happening. You only feel the result: stress, fear, confusion, and you think, this is just how life is. But it is not life. It is the mind's interpretation of life. And that interpretation is not neutral. It is conditioned, built from past experiences, from what you were taught, from what you went through, from what you feared, from what you desired. The mind is not seeing reality clearly. It is filtering it through layers of memory, through patterns, through habits. So, when a situation happens, you are not seeing it directly. You are seeing it through those filters, and then you react, as if that filtered version is the truth. This is how the cycle continues, again and again. The same patterns, the same reactions, the same suffering, repeating. Not because life is repeating, but because the mind is. Buddhism points to this very clearly. The mind is not the problem. Unawareness of the mind is the problem, because when you are unaware, you are inside the mind, completely identified, completely controlled. But the moment you become aware, everything begins to change. You start noticing your thoughts, not just their content, but their movement, how they appear, how they change, how they disappear. You begin to see patterns, repetition, certain thoughts coming back again and again, certain fears repeating, certain judgments returning. And once you see this, a realization begins to form. If these thoughts keep repeating, are they actually true, or are they just habits? This question is powerful because it breaks the illusion of certainty. It creates space, and in that space, you are no longer automatically believing everything. You are observing, and observation changes the entire dynamic. Because when you observe a thought, you are no longer inside it. You are outside it, watching it, and that creates distance. Before, a thought appeared, and you became it. Now, a thought appears, and you see it. You notice its tone, its direction, its intention, and because you see it, you don't have to follow it. You don't have to believe it. You don't have to build a story around it. You can let it pass. This is what awareness does. It interrupts the automatic cycle, not by force, but by clarity. The mind still produces thoughts. It doesn't stop. But now, it no longer has full control, because you are no longer unconscious. You are present, watching, and this changes your relationship with everything. Fear arises. but you see it. You don't immediately become afraid. You observe the thought creating the fear, and in that observation, there is space. Anger appears, but you notice it. You don't instantly react. You see the thought behind it, and that slows the reaction. Doubt comes, but you recognize it as a pattern, not as truth. And because of that, it loses its power. This is not suppression. You are not pushing thoughts away. You are not controlling the mind. You are understanding it. And understanding creates freedom, because what you understand clearly no longer controls you unconsciously. Buddhism describes this as awakening, not in a mystical sense, but in a very direct way. You wake up from being lost in the mind. You wake up from automatic thinking. You wake up from unconscious patterns. And once you wake up, you cannot go back to complete blindness. You may still get caught in thoughts sometimes. You may still react, but something inside you knows. This is the mind. This is a pattern. This is not absolute truth. And that knowing reduces the intensity. It shortens the cycle. It brings you back faster. And, over time, the grip of the mind weakens, not because it disappeared, but because you are no longer fully identified with it. You are no longer controlled by every thought. You are no longer trapped inside every story. You are aware, present, watching, and in that awareness, there is freedom, not dramatic, not loud, but quiet, stable, always available, because it was always there, hidden behind the noise of the mind. And now, you are beginning to see it. Look even more carefully. The mind does not only speak, it convinces. It creates a sense of certainty, a feeling that what it is saying must be true. And that feeling is what traps you, because you don't just hear the thought, you feel it. And when you feel it, you stop questioning it. If the mind says something is wrong, you feel uneasy. If it says this will fail, you feel doubt. If it says they don't respect you, you feel hurt. And because the feeling is real, you assume the thought must be real too. But this is where the illusion deepens. The feeling is real, but the thought that created it may not be. The mind creates a thought, the body reacts, and you take that reaction as proof. This is how the cycle reinforces itself, again and again, without you ever stepping outside it. You never pause to ask, what came first, the reality or the thought about reality? Because most of the time, it is the thought, and the thought is shaped by your conditioning, by your past, by your fears, by your habits, not by what is actually happening now. So you are not reacting to life directly, you are reacting to the mind's version of life. And that version is not always accurate, but because you never question it, it becomes your truth. This is how control becomes complete. The mind speaks. You believe, you feel, you react, and then the reaction creates more thoughts, and the cycle continues. But what happens if you interrupt this process? Not by force, not by stopping thoughts, but by seeing clearly. The next time a strong thought appears, pause. Not long, just enough to notice. Notice the thought. Notice the feeling it creates. Notice the urge to react. And instead of following it, ask a simple question. Is this absolutely true? Not intellectually, not analytically, just gently, as an observation. And something interesting happens. The certainty begins to weaken. The thought no longer feels as solid. The emotion begins to soften. Because you are no longer feeding the loop, you are stepping outside it. This is the power of questioning the mind. It does not destroy the mind. It reveals it. It shows you its patterns, its exaggerations, its assumptions. And once you see those clearly, you stop taking everything it says as fact. You begin to listen differently. The mind says something, and instead of immediately agreeing, you observe, you consider, you allow space. And in that space, there is freedom, because now you are not being pulled automatically. You are choosing your response. This changes your entire experience of life. Situations that used to trigger you still happen, but your reaction changes because you are no longer reacting to the first thought. You are seeing it, and that gives you time. Time to respond instead of react. Time to remain steady instead of being carried away. Buddhism calls this right understanding, seeing things as they are, not as the mind interprets them, because the mind is not always clear. It distorts, it exaggerates, it creates problems where there are none, and it does all of this automatically. But awareness breaks that automatic nature, because once you are aware, you can see the distortion, you can see the exaggeration, you can see the pattern, and when you see it, you are no longer inside it. This does not mean the mind becomes silent. It will still speak. It will still create thoughts. But now, there is a gap, a space between you and the thought, and that space is everything, because in that space, you are no longer controlled. You are no longer reacting blindly. You are present, watching, choosing, and over time, this space grows. It becomes more natural, more stable. You spend less time lost in thought and more time aware of it. And in that awareness, something profound happens. The mind loses its authority, not because you rejected it, but because you understood it. You saw that it is not always right. You saw that it is conditioned. You saw that it is repetitive. And because of that, you stopped treating it as absolute. You stopped building your identity around it. You stopped letting it define your reality. And in that shift, you experience a different kind of clarity, not created by thinking more, but by seeing beyond thought, a quiet clarity, a steady awareness that is not disturbed by every mental movement. And from that place, you begin to live differently. You still think, you still plan, you still use the mind, but you are no longer used by it. And that is the final shift, from being controlled to being aware, from being inside the mind to seeing the mind. And in that seeing, you discover something that was always there. Freedom, not somewhere in the future, not something you have to achieve, but something that reveals itself the moment you stop blindly believing every thought and start seeing the mind for what it truly is.